So it is 8 a.m. Without further ado, let me introduce Professor Adham Atyabi, my colleague. He joined UCCS a few years ago, and since then, he's trailblazing with his research in our department. And from IASP point of view, it is the 5th event. It is for the first time in multiple time zones. And so I think Professor Atyabi will be talking about his colleagues in that. Also wanted to have an announcement that our next event is going to be February 18th and 19th. This year we had 5 such talks, and we hope to bring you more next spring. So Professor Atyabi, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Samwal. Our first speaker is Dr. Frederick Sheek. He is an associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Washington and an investigator at Seattle Children's Research Institute Center for Child Health, Behavior, and Development. He leads Seattle Children's Innovative Technologies Laboratory, which focuses on the exploration of new technologies and methodologies for enriching both our understanding of ASD and the lives of children with ASD. His current research interests includes using eye tracking to study visual social attention in ASD, functional near-infrared spectroscopy to investigate brain mechanisms, computational modeling to operationalize and synthesize working knowledge regarding typical and atypical development, and the development of specialized softwares like apps, video games, virtual reality, and information resources, and informatics resources, and hardware applications such as robots, wearables, and specialized monitoring tools for educational and interventional purposes. It's an honor to have you here, Fred, and please take it away.
Thanks so much, Adam, for that great introduction. My name is Fred Sheek, and as Adam mentioned, I'm going to be talking to you about technologies at the intersection of autism research and daily technologies. I just have some disclosures to go through. Okay, we're going to see if this actually advances in the way that we hope it does. I have some disclosures. I received research funding, and I'm an advisor consultant to Janssen, Roche, and a company called BioStream. All right, so technologies. We're all familiar with this. They encompass our lives, and they really define our lives in many ways. The daily technologies that we use in order to complete our works are not the realm of science fiction. They're the realm of everyday reality. And these include things like the computers that we use and the mobile phones, the ways that we entertain ourselves with television and video games. But it also includes those other types of technologies that are kind of the backdrop of our lives, the things that we use in healthcare, MRI machines, EEG. These are in many ways the ecosystem of our lives. Now, technologies are special in the context of individuals with autism spectrum disorder. Autism spectrum disorder, as you may know, are characterized by deficits in social communication and interactions, social interactions, as well as the presence of restricted repetitive behaviors, circumscribed interests, and so forth. The role of technology in the lives of individuals in ASD has always been a complex one. And I want to start off, before we talk about kind of the many potentially positive uses of technology, about the very well worth considering potential negative impacts of technology in the lives of individuals with autism. I mean, it's been long known that individuals with autism oftentimes will gravitate towards the uses of technology. And there was a series of studies that have been done that showed that youth with autism spend a disproportionate amount of their time engaged in screen-based media use. And I suspect that during the pandemic, this only increased. The problem with using or kind of an excessive use of technology is not with the technology itself, but of course is with what else the overfocus on things like video games and just media consumption really imply in terms of how it displaces other types of activities that may be of potential positive therapeutic gain for individuals with ASD. And at the same time, we also have to acknowledge that even when we're talking about something like video game use, there's both positive and negative aspects associated with them. In terms of the negative aspects, previously I showed a few slides that suggested that excessive use of these technologies might be associated with aggressive behavior, more profound difficulties in social interactions. But at the same time, these are also technologies that definitely can provide entertainment, can provide stress relief, can help to actually facilitate social interactions. So it's important to realize that there's kind of like a positive and a negative here, right? Like there's these different pieces of the consideration that really we need to put together and think about in its totality when we're considering the weights of technologies in our daily lives and also in the lives of individuals with ASD. So what are some positive ways that we can think of using technologies? And one of the things is like when we think about the video games and we think about a lot of the research that's been done from the social psychology perspective, we think of these as potentially negative influences, though there's of course other work that talks about the positive aspects of these technologies. But in the context of video games designed for individuals with autism, we also have to realize that these are actually like a great opportunity to take these things that we consider to be bad, right? For instance, this over-focus on video games by many individuals with ASD, and to transform it into something that may be therapeutic, right? So take that interest and give it another face that can provide some type of hopefully long-lasting benefit. And these include systems that are designed specifically to address core issues of known atypical behavior in autism, like face processing skills, and it also includes these different types of technologies that basically facilitate interactions and training and teaching and interventions and therapeutic discovery in children with autism with, for instance, another live trainer or a friend or a colleague or family member. And it also includes more unique cases of technology, such as using different types of technologies to measure aspects of that may be related to autism information processing, atypical processing of information in ASD. And all of these things, of course, are really interesting, and it wouldn't be research in technology if it wasn't also backed up with a lot of actually pretty robust research suggesting that these technologies actually do make a difference and are able to identify the pieces of information that we're interested in. And so it's kind of like that's the flip side of technology, right? So you transform this potential excessive interest in technologies, in video games, in this case, and you turn it into something that can drive motivation to participate in either therapeutic or discovery aims of individualized understanding and personalized medicine. So another way that we can think of technology is that technology really provides these novel ways of presenting information to individuals with autism. And this is a quote by Ivar Logash, who's considered to be the father of ABA. If they can't learn the way we teach the way they learn. And so there's a lot of evidence suggesting, there's a lot of theories that suggest that individuals with autism just learn in a different way. And so this is a cognitive model that was proposed by Michael E. Kunda and Ashok Goel at Georgia Tech at the time. Kunda is now an astounding assistant professor at Vanderbilt. This cognitive theory proposes that individuals with autism may rely on visual thinking to an extent that may parallel or equal the way that typically developing individuals may use words in order to think. And so when you're talking to yourself, you're talking to yourself. And it may be the case that individuals with autism are singing to themselves. And it's a little bit different, the way that you think in pictures as compared to in words. So we can use this idea, this principle that thinking in pictures may be more effective in ASD in order to present information in a way that's more accessible. And so a study that was led by Ben Poppel looked at some kind of really simple constructs like video modeling of toothbrushing in children with autism, and found that this was actually very effective in getting individuals with autism to brush their teeth. We would just show these videos of toothbrushing to individuals with autism, together with a narrative describing, like, this is the time to brush, this is how you brush, and then there was just some brushing alongside. Something as simple as this, right? This idea of presenting things in a visual form were extremely successful, such that one of the parents in this study said that this study saved their life. You cannot imagine the importance that these daily activities like toothbrushing can have, and the impact that addressing some of these challenges in the daily lives of families with individuals with autism can have. So the effects can be extremely profound. Another system that we looked at previously is a system called speech prompts. This was a application designed by a company called Handhold Adaptives, and this is a study led by Elizabeth Simmons and Ria Paul when we were all at Yale. The purpose of this application was to provide ways of essentially visualizing prosody. Prosody is the way that you say something rather than the things that you're actually saying. Individuals with autism oftentimes can speak too loudly, or can use the incorrect prosody, either flat affected tone when speaking, or sing-songing excessively prosodic tone. There can be difficulties in the use of rate and rhythm in speech, and in the precise ways that for frequency and formants are used in terms of creating or using words. And so this system was essentially to give this type of really, if you try to explain prosody, you can just see, like, I probably used like 50 words to try to explain it. But you could apply these technologies to immediately visualize aspects of speech, so that you emphasize certain aspects and then work in a very directed fashion, in a very concrete fashion, in order to address these issues. And so a study that we did together with children with ASD, among other children with developmental difficulties and prosody deficits, showed that this type of technology is extremely effective in reducing problems in prosody use. Of course, we're all familiar with this type of system. This is augmentative alternative communication system, a touchpad, and these type of technologies similarly can be really valuable in visualizing information and providing a route for learning about communication for individuals with ASD who are nonverbal or have difficulty using spoken words. The whole idea behind this is taking things that we oftentimes take for granted, this is very abstract, this idea that sound inherently has some type of meaning. Seems second nature to us, but it really is a concept that is born of our expectations of the typical world and our typical interactions. And these type of technologies act in concert in order to take these implicit aspects of the social interactional environment and transform them into something that is more concrete and easily digested and possibly processed. All right, so now I want to talk to you a little bit about technologies that are on the cusp. These are things that maybe we won't consider them to be daily technologies, but these are certainly things that are starting to penetrate our lives and starting to come into the forefront of our lives more and more as time goes on. Now, again, when we think about the good and the bad of technology in the lives of individuals with autism, we start with the nature of the aspects of autism that associate with technology strongly. And one of the things that does associate strongly with technology in ASD is the concept and the phenomenology of circumscribed interests in ASD, in which physical categories are often oftentimes, categories associated with physical action are oftentimes associated with circumscribed interests in ASDs. These include things like trains with mechanical functions, trains, Legos, right? Some type of physical form factor that is really possibly mechanical in nature, but associated with kind of logical building blocks or kind of discrete ease. I won't say easy because it's not necessarily easy, but objectively quantifiable and logical construction. So one of the best examples of this type of technology are robots. And this is an example of a child with autism who is having an interactional turn with this robot that you can kind of see here in the mirror called LE. And this is work that was led by Laura Bach-Infuso, who has since started a company focused around building robots for education. And I wish you could, this video is not playing so well, but Ellie is a robot that has a mouth, and the mouth moves and speaks to the child, and the child is extremely excited to be in this interaction. And you can compare this almost directly, right? We've designed a protocol where one for one, there were the same interactions between a robot and this child, and a human and this child. And you could just see the difference in the engagement, the excitement, the communication and the interaction were night and day. And so this idea that we can transform this interest in robots into a route to foster social interactions, en route to learning about social interactions and interaction, in this case, interactional missteps, is a really powerful one. And in this study, we actually found that these children with autism who participated in our study engaged to a much greater extent with robots than human confederates, and actually performed better. There was suggestion that they performed better as well. This is another study that was led by Brian Scazzoletti as part of the NSF expedition that was basically aimed to put robots in the home, essentially completely autonomously acting for an extended period of time in order to address core deficits of ASD. And this was one of the first kind of attempts, really, to use a robot in an ecologically valid setting, the home, over an extended period of time without having this being directly controlled by an experimenter. And so this is a product that had to stand alone. And this product, this robot, basically interacted with children with autism through a series of games and a series of tablet-based apps in order to foster the development of specific skills. And in this study, we actually found that the robot was associated, interactions with the robot were associated with gains in joint attention, which was really, really great for us to see. So there's some promise here of not just in terms of the theoretical laboratory-based experimentation of robots, but in the long-term use of robots and a potential long-term impact in the lives of families of children with ASD. Another examples of this work that were led by Laura included using robots in order to measure the way that children would play with these robots. And what we found was that the way that children played with even like a small, simple robot handheld like this little ball robot called a Sphero, were associated with developmental levels. And so thinking about these systems not only as perhaps therapeutic systems, but also systems of monitoring and measurement and understanding of play and how play translates into developmental ability, these are things that are really exciting to think about. Other technologies, these of course are technologies that we think of a lot. This is an example of virtual reality. It's becoming more and more prominent nowadays, especially now that the cost of these virtual reality systems has decreased. What I'm showing you here are a virtual environment being explored by an individual with ASD and a typically developing individual. These are actually both children, and just by the way that they look at the environment, you can almost tell who is the individuals with ASD. I apologize for the choppiness of this video. And it's the child in the upper left who, beyond just focusing on things that you don't expect for extended periods of time, there is an exploratory aspect of the environment that is almost wholly atypical in the upper left. Thinking now about augmented reality, this is the Microsoft HoloLens, and I don't know if this video will play well, but this is not what the child sees. We just blocked out the individual's identity for anonymity. But you can see in this video how a child with ASD who's wearing this Microsoft HoloLens and just interacting with this one of our colleagues, Kelsey Dahmer, is not really interested in engaging socially with that person. But in this case, where we actually use face detection to draw a box around the face, we can see all of a sudden, we can use technology, these augmented reality systems, which place virtual objects in the view of an individual who's wearing them. We can use these as cues in order to help increase attention to specific places in the scene, perhaps boosting attention into certain directions, perhaps with the goal of eventually fading these cues in time. And that's a really exciting area of thinking about shaping attention. Of course, we can also be using technologies, computer vision technologies. This is work that was led by Quan Wang. And this type of technology can use things like mobile tablets in order to track where individuals with ASD or any individual look when they're viewing some type of content material. And this actually provides a translation layer between all of our knowledge of, it provides this practical translation layer between, whoops, this is, I should remember that it's a really strange video. We do a lot of work in eye tracking, studying how the movements of the eye suggest different aspects of about individuals with ASD, especially very young children. So much so that we can use these scanning patterns to look at development and actually make fairly good predictions about development. So much so that we can identify features of ASD as early as 6 months, and to an extent that we're starting to look at these in terms of their utility as biomarkers for ASD for potentially monitoring therapeutic treatments and predicting therapeutic responses. And so the power of these technologies, being able to translate that into a mobile setting, really gives us the ability to start thinking about whether or not these systems can be used, built in a way that can be more easily disseminable rather than being used atop of research grade eye tracking systems. And so that's a really promising approach, because it really gives us this ability to think about taking all of these things that we know from experimental science and translating them into tools that can be used in order to monitor, understand individual variation, and to predict treatment response in a way that's very accessible. All right, so I want to end with this last section, which is that the broader context of where technology has been coming to in our lives, and the broader context of how technology, medical technology in particular, is being used in the lives of people. And the thing that we always must keep in mind is that they are not being used in a uniform fashion, right? Medicine in general, the broader context is that there is an unequal distribution of resources across socioeconomic and social demographic strata. And this is a problem because people from minorities are not being treated in the same way. And because of this, their health outcomes are worse. And when we think about things like clinical trials are an area that really have not been designed with minorities in mind. And because of that, we honestly oftentimes do not know whether our drug will work or our therapy will work. We only know that it will work typically in a slice of the majority, which is the standard white, not Hispanic household, usually higher SES. And so when we think about technology, we started by asking this question: technology. Or thinking about this principle. Is technology good? Is technology bad? What are the good aspects of technology? What are the bad aspects of technology? But the truth of it is that technology was never something to be put on this scale, to be weighed as good or bad. Technology, here is the scale. Technology is that fulcrum, right? And it's for us to think of how all these many ways that technology can be used in a way that is effective, that treats the things that we wanted to treat, using all those advantages, but using them equitably. And so with that, I want to thank you for your attention and giving me the opportunity to present this information to you.
Thanks a lot, Fred. This was wow. This was great presentation. Thanks a lot. So we are a little bit ahead of time. Is there any questions for Dr. Sheek? Samuel, do you want to start? Dr. Samuel.
Dr. Sheek, I wanted to ask you about the shapes of the robots. Some people are working in human-like robots, and you showed a ball, which is absolutely not a human-like.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Is this the problem? The person gets interested if there is a motion in the environment. Is that triggers the attention? I do not know. I was going to ask you in your experiments, what have you found?
Well, I mean, it's I would say that, yeah, the motion is definitely an aspect, but we can also just think of them as like interesting toys. The thing that was interesting about that Sphero study is that, of course, the Sphero is almost completely devoid of any type of anthropomorphic context in of itself, right? Like you look at the ball and it's a ball, right? Like it's not a person, it's a ball. But by running it through a pre-planned series of actions and activities and to have it behave in a certain way, right? Just this concept of having a ball behave in a certain way, imbued it with this human-like quality, right? This quality of emotionality. And so, yes, the movement of the ball garnered attention. If we want to be very specific about it and very technical about it, we would say that it was probably the second order statistics of acceleration that really defined the unique properties of the movement in this case, and also the non-deterministic nature of those movements, which were of incredible interest. And if I were to even go further and talk about the classes of movements that are really really under exploration here, I would say there'd be Wolfram class 4, right? In between chaos and order. That's the place where all the interesting activity happens in terms of what we consider to be social interactions. But we have to remember that there's nothing that is actually inherent in the movements themselves. It's what's being inferred from behind those movements that is of interest. And so by these children with autism not interacting with the balls in the same way that typically developing individual interacted with them, that was actually suggesting a difference in the way that you perceive the ball as either a physical object or a intelligent agent. And the difference between these two perspectives, there's not a right and wrong here, right? Like, in fact, it is an inanimate object. It's a robot controlled by a program. And so so that is the construct that was being explored.
I have a follow-up question, Dr. Sheik, because can I ask you one more?
Oh, of course. Do we have time? I just don't know what the timing is of all this. I thought we were supposed to speak for 20 minutes and I was already over.
Okay, Doctor, I'll wait and I'll send you an email. Thank you, sir.
Oh, no, you can, do we have time?
I think we do have time. Yes, okay, no problem.
Yes, please.
Please ask Dr. Samuel.
So I wanted to ask you, like, the difference between virtual VR systems, which are not physical, like robots. What is the difference between the two? Like, for example, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, it is actually a great question, because there's also this question like, why should we invest in robots when we could just put on these virtual reality glasses and we could shape the entire environment around an individual? And to that, I would say, like, when we think about these, especially in the lives of individuals with autism, we should also remember that, when we use this person-first language, we're always saying individuals with autism, though it's my understanding also that many individuals with autism prefer to be just called autistics. And this may reflect a tension between individuals with autism who could speak for themselves and the families of individuals with autism. But the reason why I go into all of this is that when we view virtual reality, we realize that we're in virtual reality. We realize this is not real. And it would be silly to think that an individual with autism would feel indifferent, right? At least many individuals with autism would realize that, yes, this is essentially a video that's pasted to my eyeballs, right? So they're in many ways not fooled that this is a real environment. There's something about the physical form, about the physical nature of a robot, of a lever, of something moving into your periphery that triggers your triggers your attentional system in a very primitive manner. And I think that's I have this example that was given to me, my grad advisor, Brian Scazzaletti, when he was working on COG, which was one of the first social robots. And he mentioned that he would work on this robot, through the night, because he is an incredible man who does not need to sleep for some reason. It's very strange. But this robot, COG, he'd have him running in the background, running through algorithms. And anytime that hand would move, his eyes would shift. And he programmed this robot, and he couldn't help it, right? He knew the hand was going to move. The hand moved, his eyes moved alongside it. There's something about that physical form that really forces you to acknowledge your environment. And I think that this is not special for autism. It's just a part of our human being, just ingrained into us from the very low level of arousal all the way up in our attention systems.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Samuel, for those great questions. Is there any other questions? If it's possible, I want to ask one last question from Dr. Sheek, and if he would be kind and talk to us about the intersection between autism heterogeneity and biomarker discovery, and where we are in the field with that.
So that's such a profound question. Thank you, Adam, for raising it. Yeah, autism is extremely heterogeneous, and I think honestly, we're undergoing a revolution right now in our conceptualization of autism, though we don't realize it as such. And I think it's being propelled forward by biomarker research. If we went back to my slide that showed the definition of autism, we realized that these core features of autism, right, the social interaction deficits, the presence of restrictive repetitive patterns of behavior, there's so many ways that you can converge upon that. And when we think about the complexity of that convergence and the multimodality of all of those different converging factors that can lead to that diagnosis, we realized that we almost feel like we should throw our hands up. And if it was not for this precise, robust, and reproducible ability and talent of clinical expertise in understanding and identifying and characterizing ASD as a condition, I don't think that we would have a condition called ASD, right? And so the place that biomarkers are coming in is it's starting to look at, if we were to come up with like the best single tool for identifying ASD, we would probably just immediately just turn towards something like the ADOS, the Autism Diagnostic Schedule that was created by Kathy Lord and colleagues. There's like a world of difference between the best biomarker we have now diagnostically for ASD and this ADOS. If we look at the best experimental technologies that we have that have been shown to be robust in ASD TD, typically developing individual differentiation, we would see a Cohen's D of around 1. maybe 1.2, 1.3. If we were to turn and look at the ADOS and to calculate a Cohen's d, I mean, it's so massive that no one ever does it. And it's about 6 or 7, Cohen's d of 6 or 7. So there's a world of difference between kind of these diagnostic strategies and these biomarker strategies. And you might look at those differences and say, like, well, why are we even bothering looking at these biomarker technologies? And the thing about them is that they are such precise measures of specific mechanisms that they are the ones that actually have the potential, especially if these are replicable biomarkers, if they are able to be used and shown to be associated with some type of clinical feature, or shown to be related to some intrinsic characteristic of an individual. And we just have to be a little bit careful about the tautology there. That they really open up a world of possibility in terms of looking at very refined, mechanistically important aspects of functioning in ASD, which can be targeted directly if we believe that those mechanisms should be moved in order to affect some therapeutic gain. And that's something where the broad concept of autism has lacked specificity for a long time, and has also relied in its own version of this behavioral process, has also relied on its own version of personalized medicine, which is the goal, I think, of biomarker technology, which revolves around the talent, expertise, and insights about from clinicians and individuals who deliver therapy about the individual needs and skills and particular talents of individuals with ASD, right? And so that's the personalized medicine that we know. And I think that we're moving towards something that can give us this very precise, refined therapeutic lens and mechanistic lens. But that was a very long-winded way of saying that it's work in progress. There's a lot of different directions, but it's extremely promising. And I think that when we are through this line of research, I mean, first of all, we'll never be through this line of research, but when we're further along, we'll come to appreciate the many autisms and the specific ways of providing tools and help to an individual anywhere along this complex spectrum.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. That was great. Thank you. Okay. I think the next presentation is going to be mine about artificial intelligence and autism research. And I'm Adham Atyabi. I'm an assistant professor in University of Colorado Springs. My disclosure is that the work being discussed in here today by me is very basically in collaboration with Dr. Sheik's Seattle Children's Innovative Technologies Laboratory, and couldn't have been possible without his mentorship and supervision. So I just wanted to make sure we attenuate that. Autism spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental disorder associated with deficits in social interaction and restricted and repetitive behavior. And autism is a complex heterogeneous disorder with extensive behavioral, etiological, and genotypic variations. And this heterogeneity basically causes challenges in developing diagnostic, prognostic, and treatment strategies that are applicable across the autism spectrum, as these strategies invariably need to be personalized, adapted, and or evaluated for potential utility by clinical experts. So for this reason, the field of autism research has devoted considerable effort to identifying and developing autism biomarkers. To us, biomarkers are basically quantifiable and robust measures reflective of the underlying pathological process that can be used for treatment planning, monitoring, or prediction. And what we want the biomarkers for is for early diagnostic, prognosis, and treatment monitoring. And there are certain properties that we expect from our biomarkers. And these properties are to have index to pathophysiology, to be accurate and robust, and to be usable and easy to use and accessible. Because of our interest in understanding biological phenomena of autism, we're using functional near infrared spectroscopy to look at the brain. FNIS operates by having a source that basically emits a beam of infrared light that is then detected by a detector. This projected beam of light will basically travel through skull and scalp to reach to cortex, and it is differentially absorbed by oxygenated blood. So more oxygenated blood, the lower the signal that comes out. And from that, you can basically project how much hemodynamic response or brain activity exists in underlying tissues. A unique property of NIRS is that similar to bold fMRI, it cannot only detect oxygenated blood, but also deoxygenated blood. In terms of where it sits relative to other neuroimaging techniques, it has higher temporal information resolution than fMRI, but it has lower spatial resolution compared to EEG. So in some sense, you can consider it as the best of the two worlds, or actually the worst of the two worlds. Sorry. So one of the first studies we've done using functional near infrared spectroscopy involves looking at the perception of biological motion in children with autism and comparing them with children with typically developing. In our study, we recruited 28 children with ASC and 17 children with TD, and we show them point-light displays that represent human figure joints that you can't really tell what it is by just looking at it. But when they start moving, you can basically perceive biological actor underneath. This perceptual biological motion is known to be distorted in autism, which is interesting because attentional bias towards this biological motion is an evolutionary preserved early developing skill that is considered a fundamental process of neurocognition. What we showed to our participants was blocks of biological motion interviewed by these rotating biological dots. And what we found was that when comparing children with autism versus children with neurotypical, children with autism showed a diminished response in their right superior temporal sulcus compared to typically developing children, mimicking what we have seen in some other studies with fMRI. We are also interested in how this response is being modulated by emotional content. And so the biological motion we showed had the characteristics of either happy, fearful, neutral, or angry. And we found from this analysis that this canonical response of the right superior temporal sulcus and its hypoactivation was actually most characteristics of the fearful and happy emotions. It suggested that there is heterogeneity in emotional response in typically developing individuals and in individuals with autism, but these broad patterns of hypoactivation in autism rings through across all the emotions. We are also interested to understand the underlying predictive power of the patterns isolated with these near signals in response to our biological motion cues. We use a set of classification techniques and feature representation sets. And what we see is that simple methods such as boosted logistic regression don't perform as well as some of the more advanced techniques such as bagging. And we achieved a classification accuracy of almost 70%, suggesting that the information can be mined, and there is some value in doing so if there is a specific target that we want to tune towards. Another successful platform to study between group differences in individual with and without autism is eye tracking. Looking pattern differences are shown to separate individuals with autism spectrum disorder and typically developing controls. And recent studies have shown that in children with autism, these patterns change with intellectual and social impairments, suggesting that patterns of social attention provides indices of clinically meaningful variation in ASC. We conducted a naturalistic study of children with ASC, typically developing, and enrolled 55 children with ASC and 32 children with typically developing in our study. And a battery of eye tracking video stimuli were basically used in the study, including activity monitoring, social referencing, theory of mind, and dyadic beat tasks. This work reports on feasibility of spatial temporal scan paths generated from eye gaze patterns of these paradigms in stratifying ASC and TD groups. There is a reason why we went through this path to generate scan paths. The gold standard approach in eye tracking analysis is that you manually mark certain locations on the screen, on the video, frame by frame, that resembles the eye location, the head location, the body location, and any distractor on the scene. And then you look at percentage of the time that your participants are basically looking at any of these locations. And then you can contrast that with some social and behavioral deficits. But this is not necessarily an easy task to do, and is quite time consuming and requires expert input. And it's very difficult to change your analysis if the effects that you're looking for isn't found. So a more straightforward approach is to use scan paths that do not require the labor-intensive task of marking every frame and every region of interest in these videos. But on the other hand, in order for this approach to work, you need to use predictive power of machine learning. So this study presents an approach for automatically identifying clinically meaningful information contained within the raw eye tracking data of children with ASC and TD. The proposed mechanism utilizes combination of eye gaze scan paths, which is spatial information, fused with temporal information and pupil velocity data, and a convolutional neural network for stratification of diagnosis of ASC versus TD. So what we found is that the special eye gaze representations in the form of scan paths in stratifying ASC and TD is feasible, and we get to a classification accuracy of 74.4%. And these special eye gaze features, like scan paths, are shown to be sensitive to factors mediating heterogeneity in ASC, where we found 80.5% classification accuracy in ASD children between 2.4 years old versus 10 to 17-year-old. And we were also successfully been able to separate, stratify genders by looking at males versus females in our ASC group. And we've been able to get to 78.0% accuracy. And we were also able to get a good performance, a very good performance when we look at the mixture of age and gender, looking at 5 to 9-year-old groups and looking at male versus females in ASC, we were able to get to 98.8%. So limiting the scan paths, scan path representations temporally increase variance in stratification performance, attesting to the importance of temporal dimensions of eye gaze data. And spatial temporal scan paths that incorporate the velocity of eye movements in their image of eye gaze are shown to outperform other feature representation methods, achieving classification accuracy of 80.25%. So Again, I'm going to go back to the earlier slides where we discussed what is a biomarker and what do we want out of it. So we said that we want a biomarker to help us with early diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment monitoring. And we wanted to have an index into pathology, accurate, to be accurate and robust, and be usable and easy to use and accessible. So professional eye tracking systems are great. They are not as expensive as something like NIRS that costs something around $100,000. And in fact, they cost around 30,000. But what we want is something cheaper, accessible, and robust, something that everybody can have and can use without that much of need for expertise to how to basically use the device. One possibility is video games. There are several successful studies in other fields with gaming and mobile platforms. One example is C-Hero Quest, which was a game developed to study early signs of dementia and Alzheimer, and managed to attract over 2 million usages in its first year of release and showed gender differences in navigational habits. Our goal is to do something similar and possibly look at social preferences as an indicator of autism. What we are interested in is what we can do with these sort of mobile applications. We have a lot of experience working with video games and mobile technologies, and I'm going to talk about one of these studies called Free Speech Platform. So Free Speech was an augmented and alternative communication app, or AAC. There are several AAC apps in App Store for autism that have potential for collecting meaningful data. And Free Speech was basically an AAC app that was developed in Yale Child Study Center to help children with ASC to communicate. A subset of individuals who downloaded and used the app also answered survey questions revealing their diagnosis class. And from this usage, we look at course characteristics, drive measures from usage patterns such as the length of each use and the number of words selected in each use and the frequency of words selected. And only the frequency of the words selected resulted in between group differences of ASC and non-ASC. This is looking at a very coarse information of usage, and we wanted to ask the question of how much information is actually present in the individual keystrokes and keypress. We use these information in each keystroke as a feature representation so that we can capture and encode every manipulation of the system by the user. And we wanted to ask the question of, can we actually use that to identify between group differences? Using a stacked autoencoder, we managed to achieve average diagnostic prediction accuracy of 82% just by looking at the sequence of key presses, the sequence of usage patterns in individuals who downloaded this app and use it. And this can be considered as a very modest performance. I want to wrap up my presentation with a brief discussion about social robotics and what we are doing at UCCS about social robotics. We've got several ongoing studies at the moment that we are building the platforms to study social robotics. We've got platforms using printable humanoid robot, that 3D printable humanoid robot called Poppy. You see pictures of it in the left of the screen in here. And we've got a team of 8 students who are working on generating SDKs and core functionalities for social interaction with possible future intervention vision for this. And we've got also multiple teams of students who work with our now humanoid platforms. And I've got a video in here that shows how to draw, how now can be programmed to draw simple shapes and communicate and interact, and explain how the strategy is used to basically draw shapes. And we've got multiple other studies that focus on teaching emotional body gestures to children using the Now robot. And currently we've got a project that is focused on using this platform for math tutoring and teaching kids about math concepts and helping them with their learning in the mathematical skills. I'm going to run this video and you can see how it performs. Uh, so obviously there is a lot of room to improve, especially in our robots drawing skills. But that hopefully would give you a taste of where we are in social robotics and where we are moving towards, and what sort of future studies we would be looking for. Thanks a lot for your attention to this presentation. I want to thank Dr. Sheik's team in Seattle Children. Without their input and collaboration, these studies were impossible. Thanks a lot.
Adham, can I ask you a question on the?
Please do.
Yes, so I think programming robot like that to do what you are showing us, it's actually difficult, right? So for example, the felt of the pen has to touch the whiteboard. Those things, how did you manage to pull that off? What are they doing? Is it like, what is the programming behind it?
So there are certain issues with the design in this particular study. For example, we didn't have a see-through board. If you had a see-through board, we could basically show this from the other angle, and that would make it a much better platform. But we obviously couldn't basically fix the problem with holding the pen correctly. So when we were putting it on the board, the pen would basically come out of the hand, and those grasping is not completely done. But what we did in here, we basically went out of our way. When I say we, I'm talking about the students. Basically went out of their ways and generated an SDK for the Now robot that will allow us to have certain functionalities in terms of motion, cognition, speech, image processing, all of them together. And then the application that I showed you basically utilizes these individual cores in the SDK that would basically incorporate various types of deep learning algorithms for robotic visions and object detection and detecting the distance and the depth of the scene. And they incorporated that through their cognition to create some sort of plan on the motion of the body limbs, to understand that what sort of motion is required from that distance to basically draw the type of shapes that they want to draw. I hoped that in the future implementation of these applications, we can have this a bit more adaptive. At the moment, it's not as adaptive that we want it to be, but at the same time, we can also consider it as a little kid that by more and more training on how to draw perfect shapes, it's going to become more and more accurate. So there is a long way to go in front of us, but we are going through it step by step. Did I answer your question?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is great work. It's just happening down the road from us. I appreciate that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adam, can I ask you some questions?
Please do.
Well, actually, questions and comments. First of all, I think you give me and our lab too much credit. I mean, this is so much of this is just completely attributed to your genius, and so thank you. I mean, it's been my privilege to work with you.
Thank you.
And so the there's actually two questions. One, I think it was a really interesting question that you gave in response to Dr. Sunanashi. Sorry, I butchered your name, Sudanashu. But Sudanash, which is that, you know, if you look at the way that your robots are learning through these, correct me if I'm wrong, some deep learning, but some other types of machine learning algorithms to draw, the idea that they are going through the same developmental steps maybe as like a child would. Yes. Through their development. And of course, there's like multiple aspects to it. One is the motor coordination piece. The other is the representational piece. And I think of, you know, like when my daughter was drawing pictures of me, for instance, when she was very young, she drew me with this like giant balloon head, because apparently I have a really big head. I mean, everyone can tell you that, but do you think that there is like, what do you think is the interplay between the representation of the objects and kind of the conceptual, like how do you think that would play through in, or does it have a role in terms of the deep learning and the learning these particular skill skill aspects for robots? That'd be the first question. And the second is, and I'm hoping that you can talk about this, is that you didn't talk at all about what I've always considered to be one of the most amazing areas that you work in, which is in brain-computer interfaces. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Sure. Thanks a lot for your question, and I'm going to try to go fast through it. So the actual vision of what we started with on our social robotics teams was exactly what you mentioned. The idea was to learn to draw with a kid. It wasn't to teach a kid how to draw. So which means that we wanted the robot to start from simple shapes and learn how to draw simple shapes. Then we can provide a picture, a sophisticated picture, and then it can basically decompose that picture, that scene, to simple shapes, and through simple shapes, put it together. These are the type of steps that a painter, a skilled painter would go through in order to draw a face. He or she wouldn't just go and draw a face. He would start, or she would start, with simple shapes, and then he or she would refine those simple shapes to create the components of a face or a natural scene, and so on. So that was the vision. We obviously have a lot of work to be done in that. And I'm not sure if we can ever get there. This is such a unique direction to go. But the other thing that we have to think about is that how useful this can be for children with autism. There are certain core capabilities that this robot is coming with without actually advertising it. And those capabilities is the ability to interact, the ability to talk through, and the ability to teach in very view form. So if you put all three of these together and consider children with autism who do not necessarily like to interact with, socially interact with people, but they might be more open to interact with social robots that are non-social. And they are not trying to teach them to be social, but they are trying to basically put triggers of learning how to be social through these interactions that has nothing to do with learning how to be social, but just to learn how to draw something. I think this is the whole vision on this. I'm not sure when, hopefully, we can get to that. And at this point, I don't have any data to talk about how effective this can be. We need to do a lot of tests to make this happen and see if our hypothesis is going to work on that. With your second question, the field of brain-computer interfacing is such an interesting field, in my opinion. It's one of those fields that utilizes eye tracking, EEG, and other sort of mediums for collecting behavioral data and brain data from human beings. But the interesting thing is that it's basically dominated by computational intelligence and machine learning, unlike other neuroscience fields. So by that, it will basically focuses on pattern recognition predominantly. And through that, we could basically create mechanisms that and algorithms that would basically try to find a nail in a haystack. And the issue about that is the nail in a haystack is the exact problem that we've got with finding biomarkers, EEG biomarkers, for example, for kids with autism. There is a high dimensional data, and there is a pattern that of response that is supposed to be unique to kids with autism. But this pattern is hidden underneath of so many other patterns that are masking it together. And if, in my belief, if there is something called autism, then there should be a unique pattern, a core pattern beneath that whole different comorbidities and different layers of heterogeneity within it. And but finding that is an extremely difficult thing to do. And I think one of the more advanced fields in neuroscience in that regard, in terms of finding a unique pattern, is BCI. In fact, a study that we did during the summer with our NSF REU students, 2 of them, we were looking at doing subject transfer within a data set and across data set on motor imaginary tasks. Now, the issue, and I'm going to be very brief and very fast to this, on this. The issue in here is that these studies are using different protocols on how to collect data. They are actually collected on different continents. And we've got no clue about who is the participant. We don't know if they are females or males. We don't know their health situation. We don't know their age. We don't know if they're left-handed or right-handed. We don't even know if they actually did the job, if the task correctly or not. We are just blankly given a data set with some subjects in it. And we don't even know if one subject is basically performing all of those tasks, and they divided it into, for example, 5 subjects, or there are actually 5 subjects there. And then there are different equipments, different settings of those equipments, different number of channels, different sample rate, and so on. So the ability to use a convolutional neural network to basically focus on an underlying pattern that represents the way that somebody think about the movement of the left hand or the movement of the right hand, and create a model that can be applied to a new data from recorded with a different group and with a different type of device that did, for example, 4 tasks or 2 tasks or 3 tasks, that some of them are similar to what this model is trained on, and be able to get to something like 80% or 90% accuracy would indicate that there is an underlying pattern that is task specific, and response is a specific response to a certain stimuli. And that can also exist in response of kids with autism to a stimulus. It just needs to be parsed correctly and to be open-minded about how to look for it. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks a lot. I think at this point we are 10 minutes behind. So I just like to move forward. If there is any more question, I would be more than happy to answer. Please put them in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing.
You're still sharing, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. So our next speaker is Dr. Alireza Tahrir. He holds a PhD in mechanical engineering with emphasis on social robotics from Sharif University of Technology in Tehran, Iran. He is currently an assistant professor of mechanical engineering and the head of the social and cognitive robotics lab at Sharif University of Technology in Iran. During the period of 2015 to 17, he has spent a 1-year sabbatical as a research scholar at Yale University and the University of Denver in United States. Alireza, please take it away.
Thank you, Adham. In the name of the absolute knowledge, hi everyone. I'm very glad that I'm here. Thank you. Have my screen?
Yes, please share your screen.
Sure.
Alireza, as much as I love seeing you, I think you're having some bandwidth issues. So if you share your screen, do you think that you might get better bandwidth if you stop videos, and I'll stop mine as well?
Dr. Sheek, I cannot hear you well. Just want to know that whether you can see my screen right now.
Alireza, can you please stop your camera and just share your screen? That way, hopefully, you're gonna have.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do it. Is it right now? Is it okay right now?
It looks
Perfect.
great.
Perfect.
Good, good, very good. Thank you for inviting me as a speaker to this seminar. I'm Alireza Tahrir, an assistant professor at Sharif University of Technology. I'm the head of the Social and Cognitive Robotics Lab, and I would like to present my talk entitled Utilizing Social Robots and Virtual Reality Systems for Education and Cognitive Rehabilitation of Children with Autism. In this slide, you can see our lab, some of our colleagues, our students, and also some of our robots. Dr. Meghdari has been recently retired, and recently I became the head of the Social and Cognitive Robotics Lab. In our lab, we design and fabricate different social robots or virtual reality games. Then we use AI algorithms to empower them, and then conducting human-robot interaction interventions for children with special needs, such as children with autism, children with cancer, children with dyslexia, and so on. In this talk, after a short definition of social robots and autism spectrum disorders, I will talk about 4 main parts. 2 are about the acceptance of real and virtual reality robots, and 2 is about the using virtual robots or real robots for education and rehabilitation of children with ASD. If I want to present a short definition of social robots, I might say that a social robot is an entity that not only can sense, think, and act, but also can be able to communicate with humans and or other social robots. Here you can see me and some of our social robots here. Just for your information, it is expected that by 2035, about half percent, about 50% or half of the nowadays jobs will be handled by social robotic platforms, and this could be a news that social robotic is an emerging technology. You might be interested to see some of our robots. This is the Arash robot, which is designed and fabricated to communicate with children with cancer in pediatric hospitals. This is the Rasa robot. This robot can perform sign language, Iranian Sign Language, and it is fabricated to interact with children with hearing problems. The third robot is the Maya robot, which is an elephant-like robot to interact with children in pediatric hospitals. And the last one is the Taban robot, which has a projector in its head and is used to educate children with dyslexia. And about the autism, you know much more better than me that what the autism is. It's a lifelong developmental disability that affects the way a person communicates to people around them. But the good news is that researchers reported that individuals with autism often enjoy interacting with intelligent devices and social robots. So we might be able to teach some skills to children with ASD that they do not learn in their real life. So regarding the part 1 of our talk, my talk, I would like to speak about the robots acceptance rate. We have 2 main goals here. First is investigating the effect and acceptability of our HRI platforms, and also developing automated assessment systems for imitation tasks. I mean, facial imitation or gross imitation tasks based on machine learning algorithms. And these are based on the following 2 papers. For the first one, in one of our study, we empower our HRI platform to react emotionally to the participants' facial behaviors in real time. We use the Alice R50 robot made by Robokind Hansen company. We recruited 14 children with autism between 4 to 8 years old, and 11 of them agreed to participate in our study. So we have about a 70% acceptance rate. Then we developed an automated assessment system for assessing facial imitation tasks based on fuzzy seeming algorithm. Here you can see the Alice robot, which can detect the facial expressions of the user and react appropriately. We use Microsoft Kinect sensor to do the facial expressions recognition, and then the robot can perform an appropriate facial expression based on our developed HRI platform. Different facial expressions were produced by the Alice robot and also a human mediator. You can see a sample video here. And the child asked to imitate the facial expressions of the robot or the mediator. We observed that in our study, the scores of children in child human mediator mode was higher than the child robot mode. And we also tried to provide a machine learning based algorithm to automatically score the facial expression tasks. And we observed that the Pearson's correlation R was about 89%, which was a sufficient agreement on the automated and manual scores. In another study, we do the same thing, but for gross imitation tasks. We empowered our social robot Now and Alice to imitate the user in upper body movement, and also in one mode, we asked the user to imitate the robot's actions. Again, we developed a reciprocal HRI platform for this one. We recruited 20 TD children, typically developing children, and also 20 children with autism, and asked them to interact with robots and imitate the robot or human mediator in different modes. We observed that, as expected, the imitation scores of typically developing group was significantly better than the ASD group, but the interesting observation was that in both groups, they got higher scores in human mediator child mode than the robot child mode. We used the action state algorithm to translate each action into one picture, and we designed the pixels value in order to be yellow for good action and blue for bad action. So you can see that, for example, in this action, the participant did the work very well, but in this action, he or she has done so many faults in different features, I mean, different body angles. And also in this picture, you can see the time series of the distribution of left and right hands for different participants during the same action. So as you can see, the blue ellipses, which are the position of the left and right hands of children with autism, are so bigger than the other two ellipses, which are related to TD children or their parents. And we could use different AI algorithms such as hidden Markov model and so on and so forth to automatically score the children's imitation. And we published this work in International Journal of Social Robotics last year. In the second part, when we observed that about 70% of our children would like to interact with robot, we can use robots for education and cognitive rehabilitation. So our main research questions were, does a social robot have the ability to teach music to children with autism, or can robot-assisted interventions affect social and cognitive skills in children with autism through different education, such as music education? I would like to talk about two of my papers, which you can see right now. We empowered the Now robot to play a xylophone. Here is the happy birthday song, and this is a gift to whom his or her birthday is today or around today. This is me playing the guitar alongside the robot. Robot can play the xylophone with both of its hands, and also the eyes color could be changed to the bars color if necessary. You can, insert a music sentence for the robot, so the robot can play different music sentences. We performed this education for some children with autism. We asked for children with autism to take part in this study.
نیما بلده. نیما ببین اینجا 2 تا آبیه. تو میدونی اسم این آبیه چیه؟ به این میگن دو. آبی اسمش چیه؟
And this is the last part, which is playing music sentences. Some music sentences have been copied on the paper, and the child has been asked to perform it. We have used different criteria and assessment tools to evaluate the impact of this study. For example, had human assessments in music education, as well as evaluating imitation or cognitive skills or joint attention skills. And also we provided some questionnaires that were filled in by the parents. We observed that the social skills of children with high functioning autism improved slightly during the course of the program, and also the parenting stress level of the parents decreased during this study. In another study, we had 3 pairs of children. One of them was an autistic twins, twin brothers, which both had autism. The other one was 2 brothers with autism. One of them was 9 and one of them was 15, and the third part was 2 classmates with autism. We involved them in some robot-assisted interventions based on imitation and joint attention skills. And after doing movies content analysis, we know that some of them showed some improvement in social skills, some of them showed some improvement in imitation skills, and so on. The third part, which I want to talk about, is the virtual reality robots acceptance level. Alongside the real robot, we also use virtual reality systems too. In my talk, I want to investigate whether or not social virtual reality robots, or V2Rs, could be appropriate tools for a situation whether real robots are not available. Here is the virtual room we have designed. This is the same as the previous studies in music education by real robots. Unfortunately, this video has not been translated to English, so the robot asked the child to do something, to do some tasks, and most of them are imitation tasks. And this is the other parts of the room. The robot might point to different pictures on the wall and ask some question, and the user should answer those questions. We hired and recruited 20 children with autism and 20 typically developing children, and asked them to wear on the headset, virtual reality headset, and do the robot's tasks. In all of our items, for example, drum scores, xylophone scores, and so on, we saw significant difference between the performance of children with ASD and the TD group. And this could be a news that this kind of virtual reality games could be as assisting tool for therapists for the screening of autism. We could also detect some stereotype behaviors of children automatically by capturing the data for headsets and the controllers, and also we could have an overview on the gaze pattern of children with ASD and the TD group. In this study, we observed that about 65% of children with ASD would love to wear on the headset and involve in the game. And also we observed that the low functioning kids, less than 5, never put on the headset, and also the mean time for appropriate using of this headset is about 15 minutes. And after seeing this noticeable acceptance rate, we also use virtual robots for education and rehabilitation, such as the real robot. And here we again have two main questions. Does the virtual reality system help children with autism learn music systematically? And also, does music teaching by virtual reality technology improve the cognitive skills of children with autism or not? Here you can see a short video of our intervention. We hired 5 children with ASD. All of them were high functioning and were between 6 and 7 years old. They have to imitate the robot, do the robot's tasks, play music sentences, say the music notes, and so on. And conducting a statistical t-test, we have observed some significant difference or improvement for children, such as doing difficult tasks for all of our subjects with a p-value 0.004. We also had some human assessments as well as some questionnaires, but we did not see any significant improvement in their social or cognitive skills of the children. But for most of them, the music teaching and music education was occurred. So we could conclude that both real robots and virtual reality robots do have the ability to teach music to children with ASD systematically. And this is the last part, which is a new game. We called it Autism Park. We are working on it right now. This is the extended version of our previous game in playing music. The child can be involved in different tasks, such as turn-taking tasks, in imitation-based tasks, joint attention, in theory of mind, and so on. For example, here the child should buy a ticket to play with this guy, and then stand in a line and perform the rules.
اینجا باید تو صف وایسی، جای خودتو بدونی و به موقع سوار چرخ و فلک بشی.
Or here, the child can separate different garbage, for example, fruits, papers, glasses, and so on.
بیا با هم زباله ها رو جمع کنیم. واقعا دیگه خیلی زیاد شدن. بهم کمک میکنی؟ ما و اسمم یکی سیناست.
And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm at your service if you have any questions, and I hope you like my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'm at your service.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Tahrir. It's been a pleasure to listen to your presentation. Is there any questions?
I have a couple of questions, if I could.
Please go ahead.
So, Alireza, first of all, what a tremendous presentation, and what amazing research you have been doing. I mean, it's just really fantastic. I love to see it, and so I had no idea it was so sophisticated. It's really fantastic to see. So, thank you for sharing that with us. My first question is. As usual, annoyingly, I always have two questions. So I saw that, actually, there's three questions. So you had this comparison of virtual reality robots, but you know what I didn't see is the comparison against, human avatars in the virtual reality systems or other avatars. Do you think that there's something special about these robot avatars as compared to the host of all these other avatars that you could use? And so that's question one. The second is that I was really impressed by that decrease in parent stress that I saw in some of those measures. I mean, that's really, honestly, that is a huge finding, right? Like this is the life of the families, right? And so for you to see a decrease in stress, that's really important. And I'm wondering if you could comment on what the mechanisms might be associated with that. And then the third question, I'm sorry, the third question is that the thing that I was so impressed by with your talk was actually getting to see the members of your lab interact with those children with ASD. And you could just see the amount of love that they have for these children. And I think that's something that I think we share in common across all of our researches, this profound love we have for the families and the children who come through our doors. When you are thinking about taking this into a product, right, like into something that is actually going to impact lives directly, do you think this works without that love that's directly kind of being facilitated by, in this case, maybe your staff members, your graduate students, and you yourself, probably as a researcher working hands-on with these individuals? And so, three questions. Sorry, that was the.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sheek, for your kind message. And I'm very proud that you like our work, because you are one of the legends in this area. Regarding your questions, for the first one, we only designed some games which included avatar cartoons or robots. So we haven't designed some real person in the videos, because we did not access to 360 degree webcam to, for example, design a scenario based on real humans. But actually, we did not have any investigation on the difference between the robots or real or cartoon avatars. So thank you for sharing an idea. We can do it with our next student. Regarding your second question, we observed that some of the parents of children with ASD did not believe that their child can learn anything. And when they do some music tasks in our lab, and the parents observe the performance of their child, they feel that they do their parents' duty very well. And bringing students to our lab is some positive tasks that he or she is doing for his or her child. So the stress level decreased during the course of the program. That's, I mean, that's my opinion. And regarding your third question, if I could understand, correctly, did you ask about making them commercial, something like that, the games?
Do you think it works without the facilitation of your extremely talented students and your?
Oh yes, oh good, got you. As I wanted to say as a wrap up, I think these tools already could only be as assistive tools. So they are not a replace for the therapist or some of the engineers who are working with, but they can improve the impact of our sessions. For example, you have your cell phone or a video projector, or getting access to PowerPoint to increase your level of presentation or impacts of your work. So I believe that these technologies, so far are some assistive technologies, but having virtual reality games is very good usable in homes. Just consider that we can get back the data of the child through clothes, and using AI algorithms, we can send some feedback to the parents or to the therapist. My opinion is, not dark about this one. I think this could be helpful, but actually there's a long way to reach this goal.
Thank you. Great answers.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Is there any other questions?
I think one of the question I had, Dr. Jean, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel. So I did have one question. Dr. Taheri, you showed how learning music with your virtual reality and AI can demonstrate how effective those technologies are to help individuals or students with ASD to learn, right? And in connection with Dr. Sheek's presentation, perhaps either one of you can answer this question, but you, Dr. Sheek, also said in your presentation how the technologies show, when kind of a complex question, sorry, that how you can get the sounds out of your head to speak, and that's how they can learn how to effectively communicate. Perhaps my question is, how do children with autism perceive the learning of music, and how might, as a follow-up question, maybe the learning of music facilitate speaking? Because I know those with speech disorders or speech deficits learn how to speak effectively using rhythm or music. Do you understand what I'm trying to ask? You probably do better than I do. I don't know much about
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, for your question. Sorry, Dr. Sheek, let me start first. If you are interested, please send me an email. I will send you some papers, 2 or 3 of mine, and some other papers regarding the benefits of using music to children with ASD. It can have different positive effects for children. For example, the first one is learning some new things. Music is very enjoyable. And the second one is it can affect on the brain part, which is related to speak. And if you could increase the level of music knowledge of children, you might help him or her to improve their communication skill. And the other part is, the other one is you can affect the rhythm, not only rhythm in music, but also rhythm in different parts of the life, in walking, for example. If you increase the rhythm level and rhythm knowledge on the children with ASD, you might help him or her to have a better life in different things that is periodic. So there are lots of reasons to use music, not only teaching music, but also playing music in intervention sessions. And I think one of the paper I have read believe that at least more than 50% of currently intervention sessions for children with ASD uses music-based tasks to improve the effect of the sessions.
That was a great answer. I just want to chime in. I mean, it's a really, like the first question that you asked is actually very profound, right? It's how do individuals with autism perceive music? And so I mean, we might even start with how do we, as more typically developing individuals, perceive music? And I think it's very individualized and it's very different. And for individuals with ASD, it could be actually even more different than we would expect on the tail end of the natural distribution of typically developing individuals in terms of the strategy used, the way that we conceptualize information, the way that we represent them inherently. But going back to what Alireza mentioned, I think that the profound implications of boosting up an ability to learn something like music is in terms of the way that learning may spread to other parts of the child's endeavors in their daily lives. When we think about, like, for instance, the speech prompts applications that I showed, the whole goal was not to basically have a child walk around with this tablet so that they can kind of like see, visualize the speech at any given point in time so that they can see these characteristics. It was like a big part of it is just to say, there was one sub application within that, which was just, am I talking too loud? Or am I talking too softly? And there was like this bear would say like, oh, you're talking just right. Oh, you're talking too loud. Oh, you're talking too softly. It wasn't so that you could bring this application around with you and so that you'd know how you're speaking, but it was even just this idea that you have to convey to an individual with autism that there is a concept of too loud, too soft, and just to convey that there's a way that you can control it yourself. I mean, I think that goes on to the music as well, right? The idea that you can control the music, that you can produce information. And generalization is always difficult, has always been difficult in ASD. And it has always been one of the biggest barriers in intervention. But this idea that you could realize that, hey, I can control the way that I play some music or the way that I use my voice. Could that translate into the way that I interact with someone else? And so I think that route is really, what we really focus on. And I should just also say that the route may be different, and that doesn't mean that it's bad. So for instance, a bias towards local information processing has been shown in individuals with ASD, and how that evolves to give you the same ability to order your cup of coffee or to ask for something to tell someone that you're in distress. These are things that we don't really understand. It's really the area of understanding. I would be really interested, Alireza, if you perceive this idea of how music maps onto communication. I mean, how fantastic would that be, right? Like there are these, music is communication, right? Like that is one of the things that we know in our hearts, right? So great question.
Thank you, Jane.
So I think my thinking is that the motion is important, Dr. Alireza. I think what I was thinking was between motion and music, which does the student, I mean, like the person who is training with ASD feels drawn to? And I know that vision or eye gaze and everything else was studied before, and then also now the robotic motion is coming in with some music, especially when the person was in front and doing this, and the two robots were mimicking. To me, that there was a synergistic activity by motion created, which was very fascinating to me personally, but I do not know how the person with ASD will react to that. And I was wondering if you had any experiences, because you've shown that to many, many people there.
Actually, no, my experience is very limited. Thanks for your question. If I got the question correctly, we only perform our music tasks for a couple of children, just about 2 groups of 5 or 6 children with ASD. And we observe that the tasks, while the tasks are the same, but it can affect completely different on children. For example, we observed a decrease in stereotype behaviors of a child with low functioning autism, but for some other ones, we observe improving in communication skills. I haven't do all of the things you mentioned all together right now, but I can think about it and design some new experiments. Thank you for getting me some new ideas.
Can I interject for a second and give you another perspective that we rarely talk about? And this is about learning itself. So majority of these studies that are being done are on younger children. And the way that I perceive learning is that we learn how to learn, and then we learn everything else with the projection of how the learning should be done. So if we can teach children with autism about music, then we can use these sort of capability on how to learn music and extend it to other types of learning and other types of skills. This is a fundamental capability in the brain that you can see in people. You can see it attenuated in people who, for example, got a stroke, and they lose some of the functionalities of their brain, and then they basically transfer those functionalities to different regions in the brains, and they can basically regain some degree of functionality. And then the same thing applies in so many commercial products. And a very simple example that everybody know about is Microsoft Windows. So we learn certain concepts in the beginning from Windows 31 to Windows 98, and we continued with it. And the moment that Microsoft basically put away those concepts and came up with a new mechanism for its platform to work in Windows 8, they heuristically basically crashed, and their product was not favored by almost anyone, and they had to get back to the origins of the way the platform was presented and interface to people, because that's where the learning was coming from. They could basically transfer to the next level of the technology by carrying those knowledge and building on top of it. So if we can create some sort of learning capability in early onsets with children in the age of 2, 4, and so on, then it means that there is going to be possibility in future to basically use that mechanism of learning for learning other skills like social skills, speech skills, and math skills and physics skills and so on. I hope it makes sense. Yes, please.
Okay, I also have perhaps one more follow-up question for that. So we've talked about how music would be greatly beneficial for perhaps all learning opportunities for different people or different subjects. There we go, that's the word, thank you. How might also dance transfer over? Would dance also benefit, being as it's moving and it's music? Or how would that be the same? How would that be different? With individuals with autism specifically, of course.
Literature says yes, dance is also okay. But I haven't focused on it right now. Just in our study, we started from beginning how to, for example, make sound from a xylophone or a drum, and teach children different notes, and after that different rhythms and music sentences. But I studied that dance and teaching dance to children with ASD could be beneficial for them, but I don't have any deep knowledge about that.
I just want to say that it's very bad news for me if dance is important to learning. But it also is, you know, I think that this question of music or dance or, you know, some visual representation, they are really fundamental questions. And I think it's going to differ from individual to individual, like what will help them. I think that's where the role of like the therapist or the interventionist or this educator has traditionally been, is identifying those opportunities that will really make a difference for this individual. And, you know, it's for us as technology people to really also identify those routes to provide specific types, the right type of personalized technology intervention to help kids. And it won't be a one size fits all, but I think that maybe we'll figure out the space of all the technologies that will, you know, like for any given child, that's the dream, right? For any given child, we can identify the best technologies that will help them in conjunction with expert guidance.
Thank you.
We are half an hour over our schedule, and it's kind of my fault, and at the same time our speakers' fault, because they presented such a great work that got everybody excited. I wanted to thank our invited speakers, Professor Sheek and Professor Taheri. And I also want to thank Dr. Semwal to providing this platform for us to discuss our work and present our work. And I think it's a good time to wrap up this session. Dr. Semwal, do you have anything or should we just wrap up?
I think I just wanted to say thank you for all the speakers and attendees today and asking questions. And we never and rarely go beyond the time allocated. And this is like a 2-hour conversation, which was very fruitful for all of us. And I appreciate that. Thank you all. I think we can wrap it up if that's okay. And bye-bye now.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Semwal.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good
Great
luck
seeing
with
you
everything.
all. Bye.